Welcome to this webinar from Telenor IoT. I'm Christoph Martin and I have the honor of being the host today together with Martin Whitlock, who is our CTO. So before we begin, just a few words about Telenor IoT in case you don't know us. So Telenor IoT is Telenor Group's IoT offering, providing more than 17 million managed IoT connections today. We are active in our Nordic and Asian home markets, as well as globally for enterprises looking to connect large fleets of devices. So the map you see here, it illustrates the locations of the devices where we provide connectivity today. So we're talking about some 190 countries or almost anywhere in the world. What this webinar is about is what enterprises should consider to capture the benefits of 5G and ensure smooth transitions from older network generations. It's based on our recently released white paper, which is called The Road to 5G. The white paper is available on our website, and we will also share a link after this webinar. So, Martin, there is a lot to talk about 5G and how this new mobile network generation will enable digitalization. What will it bring technically?
Yes, of course, that's a good starting question. And I would say that, 5G, it implicates that it's the fifth generation of telco infrastructure that we have deployed in the industry, and also that there are several generations before that. And each of them is something that we have, of course, invested a lot of money in, both in terms of research, but also network rollouts. And the same will go for 5G, meaning that we have a lot of new functionality and things launched with the fifth generation. So I think what it does is that it builds on this, I would say, successful track record of having standardized infrastructure launched for telecommunication services. And I think standardization is good. It means that we have a similar type of technology available on the different markets that those networks are launched. It's good for security assessments and other aspects as well. So 5G will, of course, continue that journey. I think we all know that the previous generations of network technologies have also been used to connect things, both, of course, the handsets and telephones that we've been using it for, but also machines and IoT devices in recent years. So the thing is that I believe the previous networks, they've been used for it, but was originally designed for different purpose. But we will see now that 5G is maybe more purposeful for some of the IT applications from start. But that said, we know today most of or a large majority actually of the applications out there in the field today still relies on legacy technologies like even 2G. So that is something to consider going forward. We'll get back to that. But as I said, 5G, I think when the standardization work for 5G started, the industry knew that the number of connected machines and IoT devices will actually surpass the handsets. And for that reason, this has been very vital in the standardization work to make sure that we have a network in 5G that can manage even higher numbers of connected devices. And we know those grow exponentially from year to year. So that is really good for our industry. It also will come with new features like power management and indoor coverage and things like that. Looking at the different technologies that we have had in the past and that we are now launching 5G for, we can see that they have been having slightly different target applications. And the first generation, maybe that wasn't an international success, but deployed in some markets, was for voice. And then 2G added messaging and data. And we also saw the 2G standard becoming international successful and available, and thereby roaming was a relevant addition to it, to the standardization. And then with 3G and 4G, we have gradually increased the ability to handle data services in the networks, and 4G is, of course, what we are primarily using today as mobile broadband and a lot of IT applications as well. But with 5G, as I mentioned, we're introducing some new concepts, and quite often we are, as an industry, divided those in three different main categories. We have from the top enhanced mobile broadband. This is the natural evolution of mobile broadband, as it says, where we can handle even more data, even data volumes, even higher data rates. And this will for sure be important for the continuation of handset business, but it will also be able to use it for IoT applications. We know already today that we have a lot of applications out there connecting. It could be security cameras requiring high definition video streams. It could be connected cars with infotainment systems and all these things that will continue to have demands for high data rates going forward. So that will continue. Secondly, we have the category of critical communication. This is something new, I would say, that is introduced with the 5G standard, where we take advantage of technology that is introduced, where quite a lot of the intelligence in the networks is being pushed out further out in the network, closer to the base stations, meaning that traffic doesn't have to go all the way back to core site for critical communication, but we can define the use cases so that traffic is much more easily accessible close to the devices. And this is super interesting for use cases where autonomous cars, for instance, that require information about another car coming around the corner of a building or so, and to avoid a collision there, of course, the response needs to be super fast and really low latency on that. So this is possible in the 5G networks in the future. Then we have the category of massive mobile IoT. And I think this is interesting in many aspects, because first of all, these are functionality that will help us cope with this tremendous growth of connected devices, making sure that the base stations are able to, for each sales site, handle thousands of connected devices simultaneously. So without it, we won't be able to cope with that growth. It's also interesting from the fact that, as you can see, it starts already in the 4G era. And I think this is a consequence of having the understanding from the industry that we need to start to build networks capable of handling this growth even before we have 5G available everywhere. So the standardization makes sure that we can deploy this part of 5G on top of existing 4G infrastructure already. So it means that it's already available in many locations. But all in all, I think we will see that there will be a quite wide, as you can understand, use cases that we can support with 5G. Maybe not all at once, but at least the options will be there.
Very good. So lots of different new capabilities coming, and which are relevant depends on which business needs you have. But if you're an enterprise, which steps do you see that you need to take now to be able to benefit of these technologies as they are being rolled out globally?
Yeah, that's a very important customer question for all our customers and ourselves to understand, I think. But I would like to start by stating that IoT in general, I would say, has a tendency to be rather linked to the use case. You need to understand what you're using the IoT application for and put it in your own context, and in order to make the right decisions. And I think the same goes for the approach going forward now with 5G. So how you need to approach the 5G introduction has to be put in the context of your own application. That's a good starting point. But and based on that, I think the incentives to move into 5G could even be different from different perspectives or different customers, different use cases. Of course, getting access to these new technologies and capabilities that 5G introduces one incentive, and that could lead to certain conclusions. But I would also like to just highlight that another incentive could very well be so that you are catering for future technology shifts, because the introduction of 5G will have the side effect that some legacy networks will over time be decommissioned. And then we're talking about primarily 2G and 3G, which are both old technologies and rather inefficient then. So, but 5G will be there instead. And of course, that means that you need to have that perspective as well and look at the longevity of your applications. But before we can get to the full evolution into 5G, I think we need to understand that 5G is still in the deployment phase, meaning that it's not globally available yet, but already now it is in place in many markets and in many locations, but maybe not national coverage on all those markets, and definitely not global. So this is something to keep in mind as well, looking at the different approaches here. But you could say that I think there are three different phases that you need to look into. First, we have the phase which we call the transition phase. It starts now, basically, where we have partial coverage of 5G available, but maybe not in a way that you can totally rely on it. You have the second phase where you evolve into 5G, where coverage is sufficient basically on anything you want to do with your application. You have 5G available there. Which means that you can start to take the full advantage of it. And then over time, and this is probably a long-term perspective, where you transform into the full extent of the 5G ecosystem that we see will take place.
Great. So you mentioned that now we are in the transition phase, and I guess that depends on your applications where it's located as well. But for many applications, this is before there is sufficient coverage to take full benefits of 5G. What should you think about now when you are designing or operating an IoT solution?
Yeah, so I think the first thing that you need to consider is to think ahead. You need to understand what works today and what will work tomorrow, and plan accordingly so that you have a technology choice that can follow your lifespan of the application. So yeah, it's not possible to build applications today that are global and launch them and relying fully on 5G, as I mentioned, because we don't have the coverage in place. But on a local scale, you might take advantage of 5G capabilities, and I think that goes particularly well in hand with the LTM and narrowband IoT technologies that are part of this massive IoT that I talked about and are being deployed on top of 4G already. Because these technologies, since they are deployable on 4G, is available already in much greater extent already today. So on many markets, you have good coverage on LTM and narrowband IoT, and for sure you should, in that case, evaluate to start to use those technologies, maybe in combination with 2G, which is opting for very good coverage profile here and now, but also includes then the technology for connectivity over time. So I think that's a really good thing to do. But all in all, the things to consider is your hardware. What technology do you actually need to build into your hardware to have that coverage support both today and tomorrow? You might have to review your installed base and see if there's anything out there that has been deployed in the field already, but will risk not having coverage tomorrow. How can you treat that with good time, in good time, so that you don't have to do it in a stressful way when it happens? And then have the long-term perspective of things, because we know that many applications of IoT is living or expecting to live 10 years or even more. So I think you really need to plan ahead to handle that.
Great. Okay, so then when we move to the next phase, when 5G network, the 5G service that your application need will have sufficient coverage, what should you think about then?
I think that's when the fun part starts, because this is when you can start to really take advantage of the 5G capabilities in full. So as one example, we have these LTM and narrowband IoT technologies that introduce much more features related to power management, meaning that your battery operated applications can live much longer than they could have done in a 2G environment, for instance. And in this phase now, we're expecting that the networks will be there and you can really rely upon it and build applications with battery operations for a long time. And also I think you can start to consider to maybe cut some costs in your hardware. Maybe you don't need to have 2G and 3G support anymore for coverage, because you can expect to have coverage on the 5G networks. So I don't think it's a big deal actually already now, because we have a lot of modules and other things available that can handle both LTM and 2G in combination, for instance, that are quite cost efficient. But it's a scale game at the same time, so it will evolve over time to become even more cost efficient for sure. The critical communication use cases that I mentioned, taking advantage of low latency and guaranteed quality of service as well. I mean, this is really something that over time will be possible to build really interesting use cases on, and that's something to start to think about already now, maybe to be ready for that when the networks are available. So all in all, things to consider. I think the application development, think about it as a digital competence that you need to have and focus on your business, not technology as such, because I think the technology will be there, 5G will be there, and we will have great tools available, but you need as an enterprise to focus on how it can be put into your business context and make value out of your business rather. That's what you should focus on, and in that have a modern user experience approach to this. We for sure believe that the market won't ease up expectations on response times and other things that will be possible to achieve with these new networks. So have that in mind when you design your applications. Build it from a API-driven approach that taking advantage of functionality that will be exposed from these 5G networks, things like that. Basically, take advantage of the modern architecture and focus on what is important to your business and free up your resources for that, and then rely on others to solve the technology in their respective area of competence.
Great. So then in the final phase, when we have full coverage of 5G services and we can access those with the help of an ecosystem, what do we need to think about then?
Yeah, that's the long-term perspective, right? This is where we will have decades of business innovation to take place. And I think we can conclude that we don't know today what will be the killer applications in 5 and 10 years time frame. We know from history that we've been quite bad actually at predicting that when we're launching new network generations of what will be the killer applications. But we also know that there have always been killer applications. The market has a tendency to understand how to utilize the technology and the capabilities that are being launched. And I think the same will be taking place for 5G. So this is about putting your minds to it and collaborate with the right partners to understand how the technology will benefit your business. And we will all need to help out and collaborate to find that out, I think. But we do see already now discussions about autonomous driving use cases, remote managing or real-time machinery, and these things that are often talked about in 5G, and I'm sure that will have a play in this phase. But it's not only technology aspects to consider, it's just as much business, and this is a step-by-step approach where you start to leverage the 5G capabilities as they come together, and once again put them in your business focus and choose partners that can help you realize that and understand how you can use the technology for business, creating business value. That is what I believe will be the most important part over time.
All right. So a lot of exciting things coming with 5G, a lot of new capabilities, but it also means moving from one technology generation and another, and that implies investments. How do we know that these investments will be future-proof with 5G?
That is, of course, a relevant question, and probably something a lot of people are considering now, specifically since we have upcoming shutdowns of 2G and 3G networks. Can we rely upon 5G and even 4G to stay around? And I would say we can, because just looking at the current situation, one of the reasons why we're launching 5G is to make sure that we have available spectrum for managing this growth that we have seen in the past decades and will continue to see in the telecommunication world. So 5G is more efficient. 5G opens up the utilization of new spectrum, and this is a strong driver for this technology shift. That said, 2G and 3G are pretty old technologies, and they are not efficient enough utilizing the spectrum that we have at our disposal. So we need to modernize that, and for this reason, this shift is taking place then. But looking at a technology like 4G, it's actually already rather efficient. It is specifically in the frequency bands that it is deployed today. And 4G will, for that reason, continue to live. And the devices and technology that is being launched today will have a long time future support in the telco industry. So I wouldn't be too much concerned about that, actually, but of course, then prepare for the 2G, 3G shutdowns rather. We also see that narrowband IT and LTE-M, those are technologies launched even on top of 4G, also indicating that this is something that is planned to be around for a long time, and primarily it was done from a time to market consideration to make sure that we have technology available already now. So bottom line, 5G is here to stay, and even 4G is here to stay for a long time still.
Great. Then to start concluding the presentation here, what would you see are the key for success in the transition for 5G?
Yes, I think it says 5G ecosystem here. I think the ecosystem will be important to understand who to work with and find the right partners to take advantage of it. But even before that, I think whether you're already an advanced adopter of IT services or if you're starting your IT journey now, it's important to start to consider 5G, either as something that you need to upgrade or plan the transition for your existing applications, or starting to plan for how to utilize the technology over time in the evolution phase as mentioned. So it's time to start to consider 5G now. But with having in mind then that it will still be some time before we have it globally available. So keep in mind on this transition phase, and obviously we are as one of the stakeholders in this industry here to support with good guidance in that journey from Telenor perspective for sure. So that also maybe links a little bit into the final point that, as always with IT, I think it's important to collaborate and find good partners that can support. It could be from any parts of the value chain. It could be in the hardware space, it could be in the connectivity space and application development space or whatever, but find the right partners for you because it's not a one-man job to realize a full IT application usually. You need help and strong partners, and yeah, that is my final advice basically.
That sounds like good advice. Following this call, we will provide the material that has been presented, as well as a link to the actual white paper where you can also find more details on this topic. So thank you very much for participating today.
Thank you.